Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in Asia and Europe. I am Cleo. I am the Higher Education Projects Lead here at the Asia Europe Foundation's Education Department. And today I am joined by my colleague, Mr. Martin Hammerbauer. So I would like to thank everyone who will be joining us in the third and final session of the ARC10 Debate Webinar series. This time we're focusing on rethinking recognition and balanced mobility. Today, we will be honing in on the question, does transnational education, or TNE, bring more opportunities or risks in ensuring balanced mobility of people and knowledge? Very happy that we have dozens of participants joining in today's webinar. We're expecting many more to come in. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that after the session, we will be able to impart some key learnings that you can take with you as you navigate the area of transnational education, be it as a university official, as a policymaker, a faculty, or a student. Okay, here's a quick rundown of what we have prepared for you today. We will first begin with an introduction on ASF and our work on the ARC10 project. We will give you an overview of today's session and our amazing roster of moderator and speakers. This will be followed by the moderator setting the scene for the upcoming debate. After the exchanges, we will dedicate some time to answer questions from the audience. And finally, we will be closing the session by doing a quick round of recap from our speakers, a synthesis from the moderator, and then a few closing reminders from our team. Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce you to two interactive elements we have for this webinar. First, our polls, which we will launch before and after the debate proper. We will be asking you through these polls what you think about the topic, just so we can get a feel of what you think and see if we get to change your mind about the topic at the end of the session. Second, during the Q&A or the open discussion part, feel free to use the Q&A function in this webinar to type in your questions. You can also upvote and comment on the ones you find interesting. Our moderator will get to them, and the speakers will also try to answer them as much as they can fit into the time. So for those of you who are hearing about us for the first time, and those who have perhaps heard of us but have not explored yet what we do, here is a quick introduction on the Asia Europe Foundation, or ASEF for short. We are an intergovernmental, not-for-profit organization based in Singapore. We were established in 1997, so that makes us around 27 years old, with the main purpose of facilitating dialogue and exchanges in various levels between Asia and Europe. One of our areas of work is education. ASF is the only permanently established institution of the Asia-Europe meeting. ASEM, for short, is an informal dialogue platform that brings together both Asia and Europe. And this affords us the unique position of being able to foster collaboration and intellectual, cultural, as well as people-to-people exchanges across 51 ASEM partner countries. That includes EU and the ASEAN. Given ASF's position in the ASEM ecosystem, we are proud to share that our program, the ASF Regional Conference on Higher Education, or ARC for short, is the official dialogue partner of the ASEM Education Ministers Meeting. It is also the only bi-regional, multi-stakeholder dialogue platform for university and student leaders, experts, policymakers, and ministries. And the session that we have today is a good demonstration of that. As a platform, our mission at ARC is twofold. First is to facilitate exchange and networking among stakeholders. Second is to inform exchanges between education policymakers based on the results of researches and dialogues that we conduct. That said, the key learnings that we gather from this debate webinar series, enriched by inputs from you in the audience, will reach policymakers through this mechanism that we are part of. ARC has been running for 16 years now, and it is going strong in its 10th edition. And speaking of ARC10, our work in this edition focuses on providing opportunities to discuss the future of higher education in both regions, based on key studies done by UNESCO on rethinking and transforming higher education, as well as the key issues that we must focus on. We would like to answer the call to join these discussions with a critical mindset and contribute to transforming how we envision higher education in the years to come. So given that, our theme in ARC10 is undebated ways of rethinking higher education, and a key component of it is a debate series which focuses on themes aligned with the ASM education priority areas, namely digital transformation, equity and access, and recognition and balanced mobility, specifically in the context of transnational education. We had the first two webinars in October and November, and today we will be having the last webinar before the year closes, and it will focus on rethinking recognition and balanced mobility. Okay, given the topic, today we will have speakers who will explore answers to the question, does TNE bring more opportunities or risks in ensuring balanced mobility of people and knowledge? This session will explore both extremes in this topic by tackling opportunities on one side and benefits on the other, which are brought by TNE. Opportunities that come with it, but also we will tackle the risks. Just to have a holistic discussion. In this debate webinar series, and true for this session, we thought of putting a twist on the traditional webinar to encourage a more vigorous, incisive exchange of ideas. So as you can see in your screen, our moderator will begin by setting the scene and give the current state of affairs when it comes to TNE. This will be followed by all four speakers giving their opening pitches for 8 minutes each. And then after that, we will open the floor for questions coming from the audience. And then each speaker will once again be given a short amount of time, around 1 minute each, to do their closing messages. That will be followed by a synthesis from our moderator. And the moderator in that segment will provide a summary of the discussion points as well as key clash points. So this will just be a 1 hour, 30-minute session. And so we strongly encourage all speakers to manage their presentation time well. Now, a quick introduction of our amazing roster of speakers, beginning with our moderator, Dr. Wesley Tater. Many of you might already be familiar with Wesley. He's a prominent scholar on higher education policies and governance, and wears many different hats, such as UNESCO, the Asian Development Bank, and Mavericks, to name a few. Today, he joins us representing the University of Tokyo, where he is affiliated as a research fellow. Now, on the opportunity side, we are privileged to be joined by Attorney Ron Salo, a lawmaker from the Philippine House of Representatives who represents Kabayan Party List, beginning from the 17th up to the current Philippine Congress. He is a known higher education advocate and champion, and a multi-awarded scholar as well. Joining in his side, we also have Professor Roselini Fernandez-Chong, who is an associate professor and executive director, Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Nottingham in Malaysia. Her work not only focuses on transnational capacity building, but also teaching and research in higher education, policy, and partnership development. We also have on the risk side, Mr. Luca Lentero, who brings with him extensive expertise and experience on this topic as president of the Lisbon Recognition Convention and Director General of the Academic Equivalence Mobility Information Center, or CIMEA, in Italy. He is joined by Ms. Ilana Wong, coordinator for the Civil Society Action Committee and GFMD Civil Society Mechanism at the International Catholic Migration Commission. We're glad to have Ilana, who brings with her a strong background on human rights and development work. Again, thank you to all of you, our moderators and speakers, for accepting our invitation to be part of today's session. An important note for the audience at this point. Although our speakers in this debate webinar represent a side in the discussion, do note that this position that they're taking in the session, does not necessarily reflect their professional or personal stance on the topic. We requested and even challenged them to pick a side, in this debate to enable us to explore either extremes of the spectrum to allow for a more thought-provoking discussion. But we are very much aware that reality is much more nuanced, of course, and multifaceted, and somewhere around the middle. So before I hand it to Wesley to open the debate, we will first be having a pre-debate poll. So here we will be asking you, let me just pull it up. We would like to ask the audience, what do you think? Does TNE bring more opportunities or more risks in ensuring balanced mobility of people and knowledge? So it should be on your screen right now. Just click on whichever option resonates more with you. So right now we're seeing more people believe it brings more opportunities. That's around 85% of the audience. Okay, votes are coming in. All right. Okay, this is quite consistent. Around 84 to 86% of the audience believe that TNE brings more opportunities. So the work of the risk side is quite cut out for them. Let's see how the rest of the debate will go. At this point, I would like to ask Wesley to please open the debate by setting the stage and giving us the status quo on TNE.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Cleo. That was a brilliant overview. Congratulations to the Asia-Europe Foundation, and thank you so much for this opportunity to bring us together. I really think that this is going to be a chance to form our own opinions. So I really encourage everyone to dive in with the discussion and really look forward to this great panel. I'm just going to take a few minutes to set the scene, and this is very broad because our speakers have very detailed points to make, and I want you to hear those, but I want you to feel free to challenge those perspectives too. Because I think that this is a really timely debate and certainly not an easy one where we can walk away feeling, that these are small issues that we're dealing with. I mentioned it's timely because, and I think you saw this timely debate, the opportunities and risks. I just wanted you to first concentrate on those two words that we're trying to split it down the middle. And I wouldn't lose track of that end there, which is we seem to kind of universally agree and accept that we're all collectively trying to ensure balanced mobility of knowledge and people. And I think we can challenge that as well. But for our discussion today, I think it's important that we try to split and try to hear those debates and the evidence that we bring to that debate around opportunities and risks. So we're going to define transnational education. We're going to look at some of those key trends. So right from the top, we need to transform. Right? I think we can universally agree that the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, are off track. Everyone's comfortable with that point, I hope. We agree from UNESCO, from the United Nations broadly, that we have to transform, right? We need to co-create more open, inclusive, equitable, and collaborative higher education systems that democratize access and knowledge. So a very clear call to work differently. And I think that's why this debate is so important, is that how does TNE contribute to that transformation to democratize access and to education and knowledge? And does it do so at all? And what's the evidence for that? Because honestly, what we know, even from our 2024 Nobel laureates, is that this is not self-evident. Look at that pie chart on your right. What you see is 20% of the richest countries in the world have roughly 30 times the wealth of the 20% poorest countries. So we know this through institutions, and are these institutions that we've developed over generations extracting value, or are they really building capacity and giving wealth to citizens and people, right? So keep that in your mind as we listen to the rationale for opportunities. I think you are all very confident that 86% see opportunities here, but are you comfortable with that truth? Are you comfortable with 30 times the wealth of the 20% richest countries of the world? And I think technology is a big part of that. I think it's a timely dimension of this, which our laureates have looked at in their past work. How technology is used, in our case, TNE, how is technology used is always intertwined with the vision and interests of those who hold power. Keep that in your mind as you confidently suggested that opportunities of TNE, and be ready to hear the risks that are going to be self-evident as we kind of unpack this debate. All right. So let's just put it out there in terms of what we know. What are those key concepts? This is perhaps the most authoritative text. This is agreed throughout the world in terms of the Convention on Higher Education. This is where the UN member states agree, and they come together through UNESCO to agree on a draft text. And in that text, they say, transnational education is a part of cross-border education. It's a small part. It's one example. So I'll just read this example from the Global Convention on Higher Education, the first UN treaty on higher education. It says, all modes of educational delivery which involve the movement of people, knowledge, programs, providers, and curriculum across states parties' borders, including but not limited to transnational education being one of these examples, right? So cross-border education is the big umbrella. Transnational education is just one example of that. So let's see what that means more specifically. This is an older definition. This is more precise coming from our partners in Europe, but actually did go through some of the UNESCO review processes. And this is a more specific definition that I think is useful for our debate here today. So hold on to this in your mind as we hear our speakers. This definition says, we're talking about all types of higher education study programs or sets of courses of study or educational services in which the learners are located in a country different from the one where the awarding institution is based. Read that last part again so that you have it very clear in your mind what you're listening for. Learners are located in a country different from the one where the awarding institution is based. That might be branch campuses. That might be a franchise or a partnership program. It might be an articulated program, which you're going to hear examples of today, or a joint and double degree program that are awarded by both institutions, or it might be distance and virtual education, some of the ed tech principles that I'm particularly interested in. Now, when you read this definition, I just want you to keep in mind that we're not just talking about higher education, right? It does say all types of higher education study programs, comma, or sets of courses of study, right? So that or is very important when we're talking about transnational education. We shouldn't allow our speakers today to kind of control access to education and knowledge for higher education as if there's a, complete authority over who sets and develops knowledge around the world. Transnational education is going to be this blurry space. So we need to have a clear understanding that we're talking about or sets of courses or educational services, because ed tech is certainly using that space well beyond higher education and well beyond quality assurance that we can easily monitor. So some very big challenges there. So listen for that when our speakers go through. I also want you to know that, we're not talking about the same size of the pie. We want to increase access to education, right? There's more and more people who are demanding access to education and training. Tertiary education in particular has more than doubled in the last 2 decades. So get comfortable that we're talking with an increasing demand for education and training services. That's very important because T&E can be part of that solution to meet demand, right? In terms of quality assured programs. Some of the most rapid growth in the world has been in East Asia and the Pacific. Look at this gross enrollment ratio in terms of tertiary education access from around 15% to 59%. That just shows that there's a hunger, there's a determination and an investment in education that's so critical. And T&E is certainly trying to be a part of that solution. So we need to keep that in mind as an important trend that, again, we're talking about more and more young people, more and more adults looking to enroll in advanced education and training. All right. This we're not going to spend too much time on today, the balanced mobility piece, but I think this data is important for your, as you formulate your own opinion. Mobility is absolutely unbalanced. I mean, look what you see in terms of North America on the left, in terms of sending, how many students in North America and Western Europe are sent abroad versus how many they receive. North America and Western Europe is on the right, the receiving end of that. And I think this is where you see substantial imbalances where a lot of students are moving to study in North America and Western Europe, kind of a classic example of cross-border mobility, not necessarily T&E. We don't have good data on T&E, but this is literally the cross-border dimension, students crossing borders. So keep in mind that when we're thinking about balanced mobility, how do we account for that in T&E? How do we measure that in T&E? So some really difficult challenges in terms of measuring mobility. This is cross-border mobility on the screen, and what I wanted to showcase is that East Asia and the Pacific is doing a particularly good job, in my view, of sending and receiving. So it's actually sending students abroad, but also becoming a destination of study. So a nice balance in terms of sending and receiving in East Asia and the Pacific. This is not true 20, 30 years ago, so this is an exciting snapshot that you're seeing most recently. All right. As we end this kind of overview, I want you to think about some of the extremes of the debate. For example, for me, Afghanistan is really a critical debate. When we hear about T&E, how many of our speakers today are really talking about migrants and refugees and the examples that you hear in terms of lowering costs, but are they accessible in places like Afghanistan? So I want to put this out there as another hard truth as we end and we move to our presentation overview, that Afghanistan is one of the only countries in the world to prohibit access to education for girls over the age of 12 and for women. This situation must concern us all, and the right to education cannot be negotiated or compromised, and the international community must remain fully mobilized to obtain the unconditional reopening of schools and universities to Afghan girls and women. So this is just a few months back, and this is a persistent issue, but there are many examples around the world and throughout Asia and the Pacific. We really think about equity and access. In Europe, this is also about the role of T&E and helping provide solutions in this space. So we want to definitely hear our speakers on these really important topics. So with that, I hope that's the beginning of our evidence-based perspectives, and I hope we can start to dive in with our excellent panelists. Back to you, Cleo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wes, for that amazing setting of the scene. Sets us up for a really nice debate today. And on that note, I would like to call on the first speaker for the opportunity side, Attorney Ron Salo from the House of Representatives of the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cleo. Ms. Cleo Cachapero, Distinguished Moderator, Dr. Wesley Tetter, esteemed panelist, Professor Roselini Fernandez-Chung, Mr. Luca Lentero, Ms. Liana Wong, educators, learners, policymakers, and guests. Transnational education, or TNE, is a transformative force in modern education. While it is important to acknowledge that risks exist, I will show that the benefits of TNE far outweigh these concerns. It is my hope that this forum will serve as a space for us to address these risks and propose constructive solutions, while appreciating the vast opportunities TNE presents. Education certainly knows no borders. It is not confined by nationality or geography. Instead, it seeks to impart knowledge, foster competencies, and cultivate global perspectives. This is the ethos of TNE. The partnerships it creates ensures no single entity dictates the curriculum, allowing for a rich exchange of ideas and approaches that benefit all stakeholders. As a British evening scholar, I experienced firsthand the transformative power of education, an opportunity that reshaped my perspective and equipped me to contribute meaningfully to my home country. Many Filipinos aspire for similar opportunities, but the numerous hurdles, including economic realities, impinge on their ability to realize this aspiration. As a legislator, I am committed in making these dreams more accessible. On July 23, 2018, the Philippine Transnational Higher Education, or TNHE Act, which I had the honor of principally authoring, was enacted into law in the Philippines. This landmark legislation reflects my deep commitment in making world-class education accessible to every Filipino. TNE serves as a bridge that connects global education to local learners, empowering them with the skills and knowledge to succeed. This afternoon, allow me to highlight three key opportunities that TNE provides. First is accessibility. Second is economic growth. And third, its role in mitigating brain drain, which is very true in the Philippines. Three other opportunities will be discussed by Professor Roselini. There are many other opportunities other than the 6 that we shall be discussing, but the time constraint compels us to limit our key points. First, on accessibility. TNA provides students across the globe with opportunities to develop their skills and expertise without the need to study abroad. For many, the financial burden of living abroad and paying hefty tuition fees makes studying overseas unattainable. TNE bridges this gap by bringing world-class education to students in their home countries through partnerships with foreign institutions. Through partnerships between local and foreign institutions, TNE exposes students to global curricula and pedagogical innovations. For instance, programs in data science or sustainability offered through partnerships like those between Philippine universities and international counterparts allow students to study cutting-edge fields without leaving the Philippines. TNE also opens doors for non-traditional learners, working professionals, marginalized communities, and those in remote areas. Flexible delivery modes, such as hybrid or online courses, ensure inclusivity and adaptability. Thus, TNE aligns with Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG 4, ensuring equitable, inclusive education. Consider the plight of women, for example, in Afghanistan. As was mentioned a while ago, for Begum Academy in France provides an essential online education platform, empowering girls to continue their studies and build their futures despite significant restrictions. TNA, therefore, is not just about education. It is really about empowerment. Second is on economic growth. TNA is also a significant driver of economic growth. It attracts international students, fostering local industries such as housing, retail, and services. It boosts host countries' innovation capacity and helps develop a knowledge-based economy. In the Philippines, higher education generates substantial economic value. According to the 2020 annual survey of Philippine business and industry, the higher education sector contributed 108.21 billion pesos, or 1.7 billion euros in revenue. It is also noted that the sector could plausibly generate annual forex earnings of $1 billion more. Furthermore, ISEF Monitor notes that international students studying in the Philippines spend between 650 euros and 1,000 euros per month on living expenses alone, while contributing directly to the economy through tuition fees. This financial inflow stimulates local businesses and creates jobs, ensuring that TNA benefits extend beyond education into broader economic development. Noting particularly also that the Philippines is one of the biggest migrant sending countries in the world. Thus, beyond talent retention, TNA ensures that financial resources, which would otherwise be spent abroad, remain within the local economy. For instance, based on the data from the Philippine Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, Filipino students pursuing master's degrees abroad often spend 2.5 million Philippine pesos, or around 40,000 euros for tuition, leaving allowances and other fees in destinations like the UK, while PhD programs cost between 5 to 7 million Philippine pesos, or 80,000 euros to 100,000 euros. In the US, Filipino scholars under programs like Fulbright spend approximately 40,000 euros. By providing options to learners to be able to acquire these competencies in the Philippines through TNE, we will be able to keep these funds to circulate in the domestic economy. Third point is that TNE is a solution to brain drain. One of the most pressing challenges many developing countries, especially the Philippines, face is brain drain. As I mentioned a while ago, that the Philippines is one of the biggest migrant sending countries. The migration of skilled professionals abroad in search of better opportunities. TNE offers a powerful solution to this age-old challenge. By bringing world-class education to our doorstep, TNHE encourages talented individuals to stay in the Philippines while still gaining the skills and credentials and competencies needed to compete globally. Programs offered through TNE partnerships prepare Filipinos for leadership roles in emerging industries such as renewable energy, healthcare innovation, and artificial intelligence. By offering quality education locally, TNE helps retain talent that might otherwise be lost to foreign migration. Without the need to leave the country for education and professional growth, Filipinos can pursue global level career opportunities while contributing to the nation's development. We note that most Filipinos who study abroad choose to stay and live in the countries where they pursued their studies. Their actual exposure to the country where they studied entices them to stay there for good. In order to retain these talents and be able to contribute to national development, it is important that we are able to provide them the opportunity to acquire such knowledge and competencies within the Philippines. By offering these opportunities through TNE, the Philippines can retain its brightest minds, helping to reduce brain drain and foster long-term economic and social progress. Thus, in conclusion, from my perspective, TNHE is a gateway to a brighter future for education, economies, and nations. It democratizes access to quality education, drives economic growth, and addresses critical challenges like brain drain. Yes, there are risks, concerns about quality assurance, cultural mismatches, and economic inequalities, but this can be mitigated through effective partnerships, clear regulations, and shared responsibility between host and partner institutions. As someone who has experienced the life-changing power of quality education garnered abroad or attained abroad, I'm committed to ensure that these opportunities are available to all. Let us certainly embrace TNE as a means to unlock the potential of our learners, drive national progress, and strengthen global ties. Thank you very much.
Wow, Attorney Ron, you have set a very high bar, sir. Well done. I feel like you're making this a very difficult debate, sir. Well done. You raised three very important points about access, economic growth, and brain drain, and I want to pass it directly to Professor Rosalini. Roz, I think this is really looking tough so far. Feel free to elaborate, but I hope we can have a debate after this. You're opening so strongly. Over to you, Roz.
Thank you so much, Wes. I'm very tempted to ask Ron to just continue the discussion. It's really a high bar, Ron. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session again. Thank you, Chloe, for the wonderful introduction, and Wes for giving us a really good background to TNE. Attorney Ron Salo, Ms. Elena, and Mr. Luca, our worthy opponents. May I call you that, our worthy opponents? It's an honor, basically, to share this platform with you, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you, especially the participants, through their questions. So allow me to first share screen so that I can, in case I get disconnected, you'll be able to read through at least the decks. So allow me to do that. I would like to thank ASAF for this invitation. It is a pleasure to be here, and I will take you through very quickly to my sharing. Okay. I must say this is a really interesting topic because I have been in TNE now for 25 years, and just like Ron, I have had the privilege of benefiting from TNE across both as a student who went to a different country to study, as well as a student who benefited the program coming to Malaysia. So I had been on both sides. So my both sides of the field, or the fence, so to say. Now, Ron spoke on accessibility, economic growth, and mitigating brain drain. I shall focus on knowledge exchange, capacity building, quality, as well as cultural exchange. I'm not going to read the slides, but let me very quickly tell you what I have in mind as far as why I think TNE actually does not impact, while there is some imbalance in the mobility, but TNE is more benefits. It brings us more opportunity rather than the risk. And if well managed, we will be able to enhance the benefits from TNE for the betterment of the global society and global economies. Now, first of all, TNE allows us the sharing of best ideas and innovation. We are able to what we call technology transfer, in this case, knowledge transfer, through the partnerships that we do between developed and developing countries. So that is our biggest opportunity that we have. We do a lot currently. For example, in many countries, we have gone beyond just offering programs in another country. TNE has gone to the area where collaborative research is taking place, innovative networks are being formed. This cannot happen without TNE in place. So TNE really is a place where knowledge exchange can grow, can be enhanced. Now, for example, if you look at the Malaysia University of Nottingham, Malaysia, we have the University of Nottingham Global has 3 campuses, UK, Malaysia, and China. And among these 3 campuses, there's huge amount of collaborations taking place. For example, in sustainable energy solutions, we have a lot of engineering programs focused and targeted to this. Environmental science advancement, again, biotech, biofuel programs are created along this line. And quite interestingly, particularly in Malaysia, we are very fascinated about this and very excited about this. We have also wildlife conservation. I mean, you must understand that in UK, you may not have elephants. So Malaysia have wild elephants. So what we do is we actually use knowledge from all 3 campuses to actually help protect our wildlife. Animal and human beings, when they meet each other, there's going to be disaster, especially elephants, right? So how do we actually make sure that both species remain safe? That's where the knowledge exchange happens, and that's where TNE supports it and creates a platform for all of us to continue to work. Now, apart from the knowledge exchange, TNE is a really good platform for capacity building and quality. There has been a lot of enhancement of quality through improved curriculum, faculty training. Malaysia is a good example of this again. TNE started in Malaysia easily about 50, 60 years ago. And where we were before, 60 years ago, to where we are today, as exporters of education, you find that TNE has been instrumental in uplifting the quality and the standards of Malaysian education to what we call the international standards and practice. And apart from just the curriculum, there is also this enhancement of professional development or enhancement of the capacity of the faculty or the teachers. Now, I'll give another example. We had an opportunity of running a 7-year project, a transnational education project, developing teachers from the college sector in Bangladesh. And this is really fun. Huh? We offered them a degree from UK, but they did not go to UK, but they studied in Malaysia. So Malaysia became the provider of a British program to people, to lecturers from Bangladesh. So this allows us to improve not just the quality of the teaching that happens in the college sector, which caters for close to 3 million students, but it also allowed us to modernize the curriculum framework to align it with global standards for Bangladesh. And the college sector is flourishing under these new practices that we have built. Yeah. And the third one, of course, is our cultural exchange that happens. TNE allows us the opportunity to promote intercultural dialogue and understanding. And I would like to spend a little bit more time on this because I think as students who had actually had the experience of transnational education, whether it is inbound or outbound, you'll find that they would have acquired what we call global competencies. Graduates will be able to have intercultural experience. They're better prepared for international markets. And today, like when we talk about the blueprint, and this is our new blueprint that's coming out, we no longer talk about preparing graduates for the Malaysian market. We talk about preparing graduates for the global market because our graduates move and they are mobile. When they are mobile, they need to have what we call these global competencies to thrive in what we call an interconnected world. So having an exposure in a transnational education program, such as the programs that our students are enrolled in the University of Nottingham, or the numerous TNE programs, you have at least 12 universities from UK running programs in Malaysia, apart from the branch campuses, 5 branch campuses. So you'd find that the students who are enrolled in this, they have a greater exposure to global competencies. They learn how to function in a competitive global environment. A good example of this would be the Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters Program, where students are allowed to study in multiple countries, gaining diverse cultural perspectives and building networks, which is absolutely critical for successful professionalism. Finally, I'm going to stop here. Suddenly have a bad throat. But very quickly, though, in conclusion, I think TNE is essential for academic development. TNE is essential. It's more than It is more than an academic endeavor. TNE is a strategic enabler for sustainable global development. Now, the current imbalances in mobility, as shown earlier by our moderator, is only a present necessity because it helps countries to grow as education giants in years to come. We saw the example of East Asia, where it is both a sending and a receiving country. East Asia 30 years ago would have been more a sending country rather than a receiving country. It is TNE that has now made them a sending country, a receiving country, because students do come to East Asian countries for higher education. So finally, I would like to say that TNE meets the needs of the country, it builds the development of the country, and like what Ron said, it actually overall benefits the country and therefore creates a more balanced global environment, which eventually will help countries and sustain our environment, because we are going to learn about environmental sustainability as we share this knowledge across borders. And with that, I thank you very much, and I apologize for this really bad throat suddenly. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roz. That was outstanding. You elaborated on 3 really important points: knowledge exchange, capacity building, and cultural exchange, ending on that TNE is a strategic enabler. Again, very clear, very articulate and powerful argument. I would not want to be on the other side of this debate table, so I feel bad for our upcoming debaters, but I'm sure they can do it. We have to push back. There's a lot we can argue against, and I heard some points that I want to come back to in our discussion, and I hope the audience also feels free to jump in with your Q&A as well. Let's pass the floor to our RIST, our other side of the table, and we'll start with Dr. Luca Lantero, and also an esteemed expert in this area, so we want to hear what he sees in terms of the concerns and risks in this area as we flip the debate. Dr. Luca, over to you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, Wesley. Now I start to play the role of the bad guy in order to.
One second, Professor. Can we ask Professor Roz to stop sharing the screen?
Oh, sorry.
And then we'll let Luca take over.
I thought I did, but let me just try. Hold on.
Take your time.
Yeah. Is this still sharing?
Yes, still sharing.
Mm.
She's still making, there we go. Off to you, Dr. Langtero. Thank you.
Thank you. Today, you asked me to play, I acted the part of the bad guy in order to say some risk about TNE, even if I think that it's something that we have to investigate a lot, also cross-border and TNE for the benefit of higher education in general. And this is something, I think there are more elements to be in favor, of course. But there are a lot of risks. The first point, and those risks, according to the research that I made within the Institute for Higher Education Law and Government Studies of the European Public Law Organization, we have studied a lot of elements of TNE sector or cross-border sector. Also, on that point, of course, it's clear the definition of the Global Convention, but it's not clear the perception of people, of institutions, of scholars on that. And for that reason, the first point is related to the perception and definition of terminologies, elements, TNE or cross-border actions. And particularly, I would like to focus the attention on the term mobility. You start saying that if there is a risk for the balanced mobility on that. But what we mean with mobility, in your presentation, Wesley, you say something very important. Mobility today is not a concept only related to physical mobility. There's something that is more interesting, the mobility of knowledge instead of mobility of people. And sometimes the mobility also within a country or a context or within also a city, it's pretty interesting because we have different contexts and elements in the same national situation that create some or give you possibility to learn something different in different disciplines. But on the contrary, when we speak about the data available on balanced mobility, we focus our attention on the physical mobility only. So you present some data about the discrepancy of the balanced mobility among regions. And of course, we concentrate those elements only on what we have available, so the physical mobility. And I think now is time also for the research and for the academic sector to think about also to have another approach to study and investigate that in a sense the elements and action about TNE. And this is the first point. So definition and concept to be clear on some elements. And then, according to the two models of classical models or approaches about TNE, we know that we have something like a collaborative approach or independent approach. Collaborative approach means that I am an institution or a country that decide, for cultural, most of the time cultural reasons, to enter in another country and collaborate with already existing institutions. There are some elements good for that, but there are also some risk. We spend a lot of time in order to create relations, to collaborate with other institutions. Collaboration means time to think about all the elements and all the activities we can play together, etc. The independent approach is more easy in that sense. I enter and open a branch campus. This is the very normal example. In another country, most of the country give the possibility, according to their constitution, to operate free in a context. But on the contrary, the cooperation with other institutions is not so clear, or sometimes there is more a competition on that. I don't want to say that those elements don't create an added value. They create an added value. We know that also in terms of research and on the entire environment and national level, but there are some risks on that. And this is the reason why some authors, some researchers look at those kind of elements like a more an aggressive approach, that is played from some exporter, national or international exporter of education. According to that point, the other risk is related to the element of the fraudulent activities in higher education. We know that within the sector of fraudulent activities, I speak about unrecognized institution, diploma mills, or other elements like that, there are two areas where those institutions that claim to be recognized or official, but they are not operated, and those two sectors are the T&E sector and the distance learning sector. Why? Because we have we can have some gray areas, something that is unclear today. And something that is unclear is related to two elements. That was the two elements that we studied and reported within the monitoring report of the Lisbon Recognition Convention. The 2 points are information or lack of information or lack of pertinent information and quality assurance aspect. So related to those 2 points, two elements, we can, if the 2 elements are not clear, we can create or we can, in a sense, found gray areas where institutions that want to act fraudulent activities, or not only institutions but people as well, use those kind of loophole in order to enter in the higher education sector or, in their view, market. According to information, we know that we have a very few information made by countries about T&E institution, their T&E institution operated abroad, or the contrary, T&E institution or foreign institution operating at national level. And this is the first point. We don't have any kind of idea. Sometimes we have to search very deeply into details in different websites. Some agreements are not published. Some cooperation among countries are not clear, etc. So lack of information is something that creates an effect also on the recognition of qualification. If I am a credential evaluator, I need to understand elements. If those elements are not clear, I have to find a way to know why an institution operating in a country can award qualification, if those qualifications are official, what is the recognition status of the qualification in the national context where the institution operated with, etc. And the second point is related to quality. Quality is the most important point here. Quality assurance aspects are very important, and very few quality assurance authorities go abroad to evaluate T&E institutions that are part of a national context. We know that is a practice that is done by very few authorities or national quality assurance agencies. And also, for the institution or quality assurance agencies that play those kind of activities, they use or the approach that is used with the same methodology to evaluate national institution or institution that operated within the national context. So I think that also in that respect we have a risk, because if we know that we are a researcher, we do research, we know that the method is dictated by the object. If the object is different, we have to change the methodology, or to change some elements, or to rediscuss those elements in order to understand the approach for the evaluation of the quality. And then there are a lot of elements that are some contradiction. I make you a general example that my colleagues that work in the enigmatic network know.
Great. And then we'll pass to Ilana.
Sorry?
Feel free, wrap up that point, and then we'll pass to Ilana. Great.
Okay, sorry. No, our international organization that run international universities. Those institutions don't be part of any national context. And so we found as a country those institutions, but at the end, there are problems in order to recognize their qualification. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. And I really appreciate you pointing out these major risks, and they are substantial, from the perception and definition to the aggressive exporters of knowledge systems to fraudulent activities, which we haven't touched on yet. A lot of uncertainties there, and on the quality of information we can actually measure in this space, and then how the QA systems, the quality assurance systems, are or are not used in place. Let's go to Ilana Wang. Ilana, welcome. We're really happy to have you here to elaborate on some of these risks. Over to you.
Thank you, Wes, and thank you very much as well to Luca. Before I think what I'm going to say complements it in that I'm taking a bit more of a zoom out approach as to why I'm arguing for the opposition, which is that transnational education brings in more risk in ensuring the balanced mobility of people, knowledge, than opportunities. I want to clarify this is not because I think TNE is in concept detrimental towards the mobility and exchange, but because I believe that our states, institutions, and international community as it stands is actually not set up in a way that would allow for the benefits to be truly realized and truly also lead towards the development of our global South centers, which are the main ones benefiting from these TNE providers. First, kind of addressing the accessibility pro perspective, which I generally also do see many of the benefits too, but particularly from the perspective that I come from, which is working in civil society for migrant and vulnerable communities. People who may be able to benefit from this, off the top of my head, are migrant communities on the move, refugee and displaced communities, for example, who don't have access to standard education, and other vulnerable groups who may not have the means to access formal standard education, particularly those from recognized institutions that provide TNE. And then I can also see the perspectives from those communities who we call sort of like at risk or incentivized to move, and those are the ones in lower socioeconomic backgrounds, communities that don't have access to work opportunities or employment opportunities, education opportunities in the immediate locality. And the main argument that I would make for accessibility and for all this is that TNE in the world as it stands brings in these risks because it actually can actively contribute towards an extractive imbalance of wealth and resources that contributes towards a neocolonial reproduction and perpetuation of inequalities. So first, from the online courses perspective, where I think a lot of TNEs are currently expanding through websites and platforms like Coursera, but also providing their own online degrees and qualifications. Things like the digital divide is still a really, really big issue. The costs for devices and other requirements that come with online education that we don't necessarily think of are things like quiet places to attend classes. These are still dependent on being someone of a certain socioeconomic status, having a house big enough to have a quiet room, having a family or a background that allows for individual devices, for instance. These are still prohibitive costs to many people who need to benefit from education opportunities. Further, internet is still actually not considered a human right in most places, despite it being dependent. And so who and what areas have access to stable internet continues to be an issue. So this can actually exacerbate existing inequalities. Communities that have access to internet may be allowed to access these. Women and girls in many areas may not be prioritized to have access to the devices that would allow for online courses. So this can exacerbate that. There's also the vulnerability to exploitation that Luca mentioned before, due to the lack of oversight and quality control, lack of regulatory bodies. And I will not expand it too much since he's already gone into it. But sometimes this lack of oversight and transparency from providers can lead to scams, not from the providers themselves, but people who pose as them, for instance, and those who have less digital literacy, less knowledge of what these may look like, may be vulnerable to saying, I want to do a Harvard education course and I see an ad for it that seems totally legit. I'm going to click on it, and it could be someone else. So for the communities and perspectives that I'm primarily concerned with, these people, it can also lead to vulnerabilities and other issues for those on the move, for instance. The reliance on technology can lead to vulnerability and political interference or disruption from things like growing trends of internet shutdowns. What if governments or states or even local authorities, local militia groups weaponize internet shutdowns to say, we're going to withhold your education if your communities don't do certain things for us, for instance, that's a possibility. And particularly for communities displaced due to political conflict, this can also be weaponized. TNE providers could be pressured to allow surveillance, for instance, the monitoring of people's opinions online when trying to engage with international discourse. The reliance on access to devices, internet, can also be leading people to be in vulnerable situations, particularly for children and young people. And I'm thinking in at-risk communities or those on the move, areas like refugee camps, for instance. It can lead to open exploitation and trafficking from reliance on places that provide charging points and stable internet connections. And we hope to not have to think of these as being risks, but the reality is that many people who are looking to exploit others will be using these different dependencies to try and extract people and try to traffic them. And then in terms of the satellite campuses or ones that are providing in-person opportunities, these prohibitory costs, because they're often more expensive than local institutions, can still also exacerbate these existing inequalities. Certain members of the community can go to these TNE providers, and then those who cannot have to go to local providers. And I will lead on into why that can lead to sort of like this neo-colonial production of inequalities as well. So this is also thinking about in terms of what they were saying for potentially more opportunities and a greater flow of knowledge and skilling outside the global centers. And undoubtedly this does provide a flow of knowledge, and the general quality and reputation of TNE providers can't be disputed. But thinking about it critically and from this civil society perspective, the focus on human rights, challenging systemic inequalities, and working to bring in decolonial perspectives, then we think about the how, the what, the why, and the side effects of this knowledge flow, which actually does come with many risks, some of which Luca already touched upon. So the first one that I want to say is that this can be seen as a potential band-aid solution or a plaster solution, depending on which part of Asia you're from, that superficially contributes towards the training, knowledge, and development of students and communities in which the TNEs are being provided, but it doesn't provide any sustainable solution towards development. Attorney Ron mentioned earlier that it can help address brain drain, but unless governments really invest into the opportunities ecosystem, and I'm not pointing towards any specific country here, just saying in general and in concept, TNE can often elevate the access to education, providing a more educated potential pool of workforce, but without creating the opportunities for decent work and employment afterwards. So if we do not see investment into systemic and sustainable creation of jobs, where do the graduates go? Where do we take these qualifications, and does it really lead to elevated socioeconomic status, for instance, or development of communities to have higher incomes? And it can still also contribute to brain drain, because if I was someone who had a TNE provided education but could not find opportunity, then I might be more incentivized to go abroad to be using my qualification, and unfortunately in some situations this can lead to more vulnerability to trafficking or exploitative labor conditions or wage theft when seeking work abroad or remote work. We still see a lack of oversight there. There aren't really many regulatory bodies who are still looking at ensuring remote workers receive their wages from companies based abroad where they're outside the jurisdiction. And then TNE can also be touted as this sort of SDG contributing solution, which can then be used for states to shirk their responsibilities to address many of these other sustainable solutions beyond just opportunities. But it can allow governments to avoid or reduce their investment into their own developing local knowledge producers and higher education institutions, both by not investing into bringing them up as worthy alternatives to foreign higher education, which are usually these TNE providers based in the global north and the west, but it can even pull away students who are sort of that middle to high socioeconomic backgrounds who may have been alumni contributing in the future. So now pulling them away from developing those local institutions. And Wes, you mentioned earlier the example of Afghanistan, and this provision of TNE can be seen as a band-aid, because even though it's a undoubtedly important interim solution and can provide a beacon of hope for Afghan women and girls, often by NGOs, UN agencies who are doing really good work, but it also can allow states to use it as an excuse. We're supporting Afghan girls to also access education with these innovative tech solutions is something that we hear sometimes, but that it allows them to not take action as international community to change the oppressive circumstances that Afghan girls are still under. Just a few days ago, the Taliban banned women from the medical field, which was the final education era they were allowed in. And the international community is still sort of slowly accepting the Taliban regime as being normalized. And this allows us to sort of say they're allowed access to education, but we're not going to change their circumstances. We're not going to allow them to actually be empowered in the communities that they are. They're still left in an oppressive society. And in terms of migration that I often come from, this can also allow northern states and western states to shirk responsibilities to address other drivers of irregular migration that we see, like low poverty conditions, lack of access to opportunities, and also allow them to not address existing exploitative regular migration pathways. So it can allow for global north countries to continue expensive student visas while saying that if you can't afford it, then the TNEs provide opportunities to stay at home and still access to education. But at the same time, the wealthiest will still choose to go abroad so that they can have that experience, that lifestyle. They will still choose to go, and that still creates an inequality there. And then it also allows for them to not expand regular pathways that student visas are currently on, for instance, towards things like the right to work or towards long stay visas. And this allows still exploitation, vulnerability, people who are desperate to find better work conditions but are trapped in employers who know that they cannot necessarily break their contract as easily as local people can. So finally, I'll go to my final point, which is addressing a bit as well what Professor Waslini was saying about cultural exchange and development of local higher education towards global standards by incorporating international curricula and knowledge from higher education providers abroad. I do agree with many points of this in terms of the realized benefit of improved university rankings and cross-cultural learning. But I want to also argue that without properly interrogating this and looking at it from an international inequalities and a balance of global power perspective, then we run this heavy risk of reproducing legacies of colonialism. Because, for example, in Western education, higher education, it will still be perpetuated as being the gold standard. And many of these institutions were built and developed with the extracted wealth of global South states, including those in Asia, like India, Malaysia, Indonesia. A lot of the wealth from the colonial empires was taken to develop these institutions, and this does not really recognize that, and neither does it challenge that how this gold standard came about. And in terms of culture, TNEs can provide a platform for assertion of soft power influences from more powerful states. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. There's many avenues from it. For example, the spread of K-pop in recent years, but we run the risk of certain cultural standards still being upheld as better. And this can lead to cultural erasure, language loss, particularly of dialects and indigenous languages. And it can also be argued to be perpetuating colonial legacies of what does it mean to be, civilized or being expert. Knowledge production is then still centered in the West because it's coming from there to upskill and elevate the expertise of those in the global South. It can devalue indigenous knowledge and practice, for instance, and is not being addressed and invested in to localize this knowledge, to preserve indigenous and local languages. And finally, from this, the commercialization of these TNE providers, who are often more expensive than the local, means that these TNEs continue to profit off the provision of education, doing so on the basis of their colonial reputations. And this perpetuates as well the commercialization of knowledge and education that we hopefully want to push back again, disincentivizing customization and localization, because we work towards this commodified, standard, scalable products that can be provided to all to lead to profit, without providing more work opportunities, without challenging what this knowledge means, what these knowledge standards means. So in essence, in conclusion, I kind of believe that the TNEs, as it stands right now, are still one part of this global order that perpetuates global inequalities and extraction of wealth from the global South.
Thank you very much, Ilana. That was outstanding and really helpful in the debate. You and Luca both really pushing back and really looking critically at TNE. So the fact that you pointed out state institutions and ecosystems as well can't realize the benefits across civil society for all learners, especially vulnerable learners, and for those of us on the move. So this is really an important point as we think about can we really all benefit from what was proposed in terms of the opportunities. So I want to move now to the discussion. We have about 10 or 15 minutes and many questions from the audience. Thank you for that. That's why we're here. We want your questions, so keep them coming. And I want to turn first to Roz. Our first question was really trying to look at some of the examples of, can you explain TNE with an example, and try to link this example with what you heard in the risks there. How would you use your example to kind of counter what you heard in some of the risks so far? Can I go first to Roz?
Sure. Thank you so much, Wes. Now, I would like to take what Elena said about the soft power or the colonization via TNE. I think this is what we call a balancing act for many institutions. Malaysia is a good example where we had benefited from TNE, and there is a lot of what we call North or Western TNE in Malaysia. An emphasis is on these kind of products, if I may say so. But however, I think what is happening in Malaysia is that we were able to take the best, we were able to learn. There's always a journey. I think TNE has to be a journey. If a country continues to be at the receiving end of TNE, then there is this great danger of being colonized by TNE, what we call the soft power. But I think what Malaysia did in less than 50 years, we turned the table around in a way. While TNE is still very important for Malaysia, international students do come into the country because TNE provides another platform for them to join. Now, keeping in mind that international students in Malaysia, it's about a 50-50 divide. 50% of them are in the public universities doing Malaysian programs, Malaysian qualifications, and the other 50 would be in the private universities, largely doing what we call the TNE programs. However, TNE has allowed Malaysia to grow and build its own brand. We have learned from the best. I would like to say it this way: we learned from the best. We have assimilated it with our own values, our own culture, our own experience, and our own criticality, in a way, the Asian way of thinking and the Asian way of doing things. And now we are exporting this outside. Had we not learned from the best, we would not be able to do what we're doing today. So the countries receiving TNE has to be very careful about where they draw that line between taking 100% what is offered by the Western, so the colonized TNE world in a way, but embedding it into your own culture and enforcing some elements of localization and culturalization into the program. So I think that's the balance that we need to do. And if you don't do it, yes, Elena would be right in colonizing, being a soft power, TNE being a soft power in colonizing, yeah.
So to be proactive in those choices of how we integrate, I understand. Attorney Ron, I'd love to turn to you. We have some really interesting points in the discussion from Ifran Khan and Simbab Bibi. And there's some consensus around here that says, brain drain is a serious problem, particularly in South Asia. So again, seen as extractive. We need to pay more attention, as spoken by the speakers in the TNE presentation. And it says, please, educational institutions should focus on it. So I'd love you to respond. There's also a response in the chat that says, Simba Bibi says, I believe the same because we have seen in developing countries in South Asia, especially due to economic and financial challenges, that international level of higher education, because of brain drain that they get, there are benefits, but it's the effect on the country where the youth belongs, because movement of talented young people are specifically impacted. So they see TNE as a blessing, but certainly a risk for developing countries. Can you respond to some of those dynamics that you see? Are we really paying enough attention to brain drain, and any responses to what you heard from the risks side? Over to Attorney Ron.
Yes, Dr. Wesley, this is certainly one of the reasons why I really push for a TNE framework in the Philippines, because we want to address exactly brain drain. As you would see, as I mentioned a while ago, the Philippines is one of the largest migrant sending country in the world, where we have almost 10 million Filipinos working outside. And what happens, particularly to our skilled professionals, is that most of those people who actually study abroad and acquire foreign competencies or foreign qualifications would opt to stay in the country where they get that particular degree. So this is one of the things that we're trying to address also, that we want to offer it in the Philippines to enable these particular people to consider staying in the Philippines. And I note the concern made by Ms. Elena Wong a while ago that while it's true that you may be building this particular competent people or skilled people, professional people within that country, but the question is, are you creating enough opportunities for them? Because otherwise, if you don't create enough opportunities for them, then they would go outside as well. But this is exactly a chicken and egg thing, because most of the investors, when I talk, because I also had the opportunity to discuss this matter with the Department of Trade and Industry in the Philippines, one of the things that most investors would ask is, do you have this available pool of talents in your country? Do you have this available competent people who would be able, that when we are going to locate in your country, that we will be able to hire people who would be able to manage them, these particular businesses? These are questions. So unless we're going to develop it within the Philippines, then there would not be enough competent people to be able to manage this particular investments that are going into the country. And at the end of the day, most of these investors would not consider the Philippines as an investment destination, because in the first place, we don't have that particular talent pool, because the talented people who are able to secure this particular competences are abroad, and they would opt to stay there for good.
Thank you, Attorney Ron. And I think these are important points. Really, how do you build capacity, right? You need those partnerships. You need that strategic investment in areas of strategic national importance. Does that mean we need super universities, super professors that have the answers for engineering and the localized expertise in a single monolith of culture for the industry and enterprise growth? We can push back on this. And I want to allow Luca to come in on this next point. We have a great question with a lot of support from the audience. This is from Chia Chi Kwan Chia. Is T&E just another way for the headquarter university to generate income? The lecturer and the requirements outside the university's original country might just be lowering the quality in comparison to its headquarters or the main branch campus or the main campus. Could the university ensure its education quality? Can they ensure it and ensure that it's equal to the overseas campus? What are your thoughts on this, Luca? And feel free to react to what the other panelists were saying about opportunities.
Thank you. I would like to give you some data that are available online. Only the data we have is the data about UK, about the income in the UK system. In 2020, the T&E sector, the income was 25.6 billions of pounds. I repeat, 25.6 billions of pounds. This is interesting. I'm not against incomes that arrive in a country. Absolutely, it's a good point. But it's also something that gives us an idea about the elements and interest also in the system. And also we have to be clear that if there are private providers, it's good that there are private providers, they follow all the rules that have to be followed at national level if they go 1,000 kilometers of distance. And this is the one point. The second point, I would like to also introduce another one, is about the language or language policies. Of course, T&E, the most of T&E exporter use English. For me, it's something that is not a good point, because for the policy of my language at national level or in different national contexts, we consider that internationalization strategies and T&E action doesn't mean only English, but also on the part of the scholars. Look, if there are some approaches on some disciplines at different, or some schools, academic schools, it means that if I use English only, I have to translate all the books, all the elements, all the paper in that language. I cannot, or I have to use those kind of books in that language, and maybe I can use the approach of another school, school of academics, etc. This is another important point. we have to understand that TNE is also a very, very good point for language policies to export also and to help language policies abroad, but it doesn't mean only English. And this is one point I would like to underline in that context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. Very important points. On the income side, the interest there and the amount of money that we're not tracking, that we don't know in terms of those economic interests there, and how that could sway this benevolence that we have seen so far, that we're at least proposing in terms of development. So a lot of challenges there. Can I pass to Ilana? There's a question here, Arina Friel, and this is a really important point. It says, I fully pay attention on the risks of transnational education, which might exacerbate inequality, especially the benefits that students from privileged backgrounds or regions. So that was the first part. And the question goes on, how do we ensure equitable access to resources? Can we be sure of these opportunities and support for diverse groups of students? Are they really, and they really are significant challenges. So one of the audience members just seeming to agree with you. Feel free to take and build on that point and respond to what you've heard from Attorney Ron and Professor Roz.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wes, and also thank you so much to all the other panelists. It's really interesting to hear your points, and I don't think anyone is wrong. That's the thing. It is because there are just so many factors that can come into how the opportunities and risks play out. And yes, looking at what Attorney Ron said earlier about the need for a competent workforce pool to attract investors and companies, I completely agree with that, and also Professor Rosalini's examples hit home, because I was born in Malaysia too. Unfortunately, I've contributed to brain drain. I'm not there anymore, but I completely understand and see the growth as well. But I think one of the issues that I wanted to raise with it is that whilst this is very true and is needed for the current climate we're in, we do not currently have enough protection, I think, for the receiving countries of this of TNEs, neither also the sending countries of migrant workers, though the pools are sort of the same in that we're trying to elevate people's education, elevate opportunities for them so that they do not have to migrate. Migration can be a choice for other reasons, not necessarily to find sustainable sources of income. But we don't have the protections in place currently to ensure that both the workforces as well as the countries are not being exploited by the system. Because, for example, one of the issues I could see with the investor companies coming in is that how much of those investor companies are actually reinvesting back into the Philippines, for instance, or reinvesting back into the countries. Are they just using cheaper workforces who are in other countries, and then the rest of the profits still keep going back to the global north? And so I think we see there a potential extraction as well, even though it is providing jobs and this is a necessary thing. We run the risk too of not equaling the international playing field enough to put power back into the hands of the global south countries who are hosting TNEs and who similarly are also sending migrant workers most of the time. We're not giving them enough power to negotiate on the same level and say, yes, TNE providers are welcome in our country, but with that you must also do things like help us to develop our national education systems, help to invest back into the communities from which you're employing, by ensuring there are decent and safe work conditions, ensuring that there's freedom of association for workers to negotiate their conditions, by saying that we're going to sustainably invest into the community and work on things like what infrastructure needs are there as well. We need to be equaling the playing field so that we're not reliant on global north or large corporations to come in and invest in us, but that we can sustainably build our own ecosystem so that it is a mutually beneficial exchange, not one that's dependent on the other.
Thank you, Ilana. I'm scribbling notes because that was outstanding. And how we level the playing field is really a big question. How do we build capacity? How do we really look at these inequities that are persistent? So I think you really raised some important points. We're going to move to closing now. So I think this is really an interesting moment where we can hear from our panelists one last time before we go back to the audience and ask for their vote again. So I'll turn first to Roz for this 1-minute overview of kind of where you see this debate and kind of summarize your points. Let me start with Roz. 1 minute, please.
Hold on, let me just thank you, Wes. Now, I think there is no denying, and I think Elena and Luca had actually shared with us some of the more critical aspects or challenges that we have within TNE. There is no questioning that there is a need for us to reevaluate and realign TNE ecosystem to create a greater balance and perhaps even to reap or maximize the benefits that we get from TNE. However, we cannot also deny the immense transformative power that TNE has. It represents a bridge for a global future. I think it fosters this mobility of people. People move. The question is, do they move with expertise or do they move without expertise? Do they become hard laborers or do they become professionals? TNE allows them to move with this professional background and professional support. It empowers individuals, I guess, it strengthens institutions. It promotes what I would call equitable global progress. So intertwining education with accessibility, global opportunity, and cross-cultural understanding, TNE can extend its benefit, and its benefit outweighs the risk if we can guide it with quality, inclusivity, and collaborative principles. So it is up to us, I would think, as stakeholders to get these opportunities or to seize the opportunities that TNE gives us to reimagine education as a force that transcends borders. Education cannot be kept to the wealthy or to what we call the developed countries. And we need to break down these barriers using TNE so that it can truly serve the needs of the global citizen or the global humanity. Together, I think TNE enables us to chart a path towards a future where learning knows no boundaries, and through it, we can build a better world for all. Thank you.
Outstanding. I feel like the audience is probably clapping at this point. That was outstanding. What a powerful synthesis. Thank you so much. Let me turn to Attorney Ron.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wesley. Transnational education is a cornerstone of opportunity, providing solutions to some of the most pressing challenges in global education and workforce development. Economically, TNE drives growth in host countries, generating significant revenue through international student participation and stimulating local industries. Beyond monetary gains, it fosters innovation, enhances institutional capacity, and prepares nations for an increasingly interconnected future. Crucially, TNE tackles the enduring challenge of brain drain, in which the Philippines is one of the primary examples. By offering globally competitive programs that allow them to acquire world-class knowledge, skills, and competencies within home countries, it encourages talented individuals to remain and contribute to national development while still equipping them for global opportunities. This creates a virtuous cycle, turning brain drain into brain gain and ensuring that nations retain the talent necessary to thrive. Yes, we understand that there are risks, but these are challenges that we can meet with a strong governance, appropriate regulatory measures, equitable partnerships, and a shared commitment to quality and inclusion. TNE is not just an educational strategy. It is an act of hope and solidarity, a belief that the sharing of knowledge and culture can create a better, more interconnected world. Education transcends borders, but its impact is universal. Let us work together to make this impact transformative. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful finish. Thank you so much to make this impact really transformative. Let me go to Luca for his closing remarks. 1 minute.
Thank you. Very quickly, the innovation, I think, is made by higher education institution, and TNE sector is very interesting because we can have very creative approaches and action on that. And of course, regarding regulations, I think that at international level, international organization and countries have to find elements to avoid malpractice in that sector. But in general, it's something very interesting. I invite all of you to consider also that there are legal frameworks that give legal implication to all of us. I mean the Regional Recognition UNESCO Convention, the global one, this Lisbon Convention, Tokyo Convention, all the convention have a part or an article or more than article on TNE or TNE actions. And this is very important also when we approach those elements, also to be clear with students when we award something, and something that we award or issue as a qualification have to be recognized, and they have the right to obtain a fair recognition of their qualifications, also in the TNE sector, where sometimes there are some lack of information and quality aspect. But this is the idea that we have to work together in order to create an ecosystem of TNE more transparent and with more quality assurance aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. How we leverage those tools that we have available to manage those risks. That makes a lot of sense. Over to Ilana for her closing.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I think I will say that TNE undoubtedly does have so many opportunities to improve our global order, to improve cultural exchange, to improve the education and the experiences of everyone, of students and learners everywhere. However, we need to tackle it from the point of view that we need to tackle our entire global order, one that is still perpetuating inequalities, one that is still exacerbating conditions and extraction of wealth and resources from the global majority to benefit many of the elites and the corporations that exist largely in the global north. So I really want to use my final minute to call for more international regional cooperation on ensuring that these TNEs and the ways and ecosystems that surround them are mutually beneficial to both the countries in which they're hosting them and the sending countries of the TNEs, and also to push for things such as establishment of international and regional multi-stakeholder dialogues, co-creating these TNE providers in courses with the communities that will be receiving them, with the countries that will need them, for instance, so that is both elevating the decision-making power of those who receive it, but also ensure that there's a level playing field in the ways that we design our TNE. And then from there, hopefully we can build a global order together in which the global majority can, with all the power that we have in our workforce, in our expertise, in the ways that we drive the global economy, can come together and use our negotiating power to ensure that the world is a level playing field.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Ilana. That was very powerful, and it really makes me feel like throughout our debate, we can really see the world we want to live in. And as we critically engage, it seems like we can do it. So I hope this was a useful debate. I'm going to just be very brief to say, it's past time. It's past time that we critically engage in this topic and this important work. And that's why the Asia Europe Foundation and this debate was so essential, is to inform you, is to be part of this discussion and be proactive. And I think that's where I'll leave it, just to say thank you to our impressive panelists and to the excellent participation that we saw today. And I'll pass back to Cleo.
Thank you very much, Wes. Okay, so thank you so much for our speakers for the closing statements and that insightful synthesis, Wes. I think that sums up very well the proceedings today. This was an informative exchange on such an important topic to discuss because of its all-encompassing impact for societies. I hope hearing these two sides clearly through this format actually gave us a more holistic understanding of transnational education and its impacts. So as Wes mentioned earlier, before I close, let me just repeat the question of the day. And we would like to ask you again what you think. Let me just launch the post-debate poll. Is transnational bringing more opportunities or risks? Let's see if we were able to change the minds of some of you after hearing the exchange between our speakers. Earlier, it was around 85 to 86%. Oh, I think the risk side did a very good job. Now we're around 65% for opportunities, 35% for risks. Okay. 68% versus 32%. Okay, 70 versus 30%. That's still a very notable change. Earlier, it was a lot bigger, overwhelmingly pro opportunities. So thank you so much to the audience for your participation. Now let me move on to the closing of the session. So there we go. That wraps up our last ARC10 Debate Webinar, and we are very glad that all of you got to join us here today. Of course, we would like to extend our warmest thanks to our moderator, Wesley, who did a very impressive job, and our speakers, Rosalini, Luca, Ron, and Ilana. That was an impressive exchange of ideas, and very happy to have heard from their perspectives as well. A fitting final session for the year for this webinar series. As a final point, we would like to hear about your thoughts on this session. So if you could please send us your feedback by visiting the QR code on your screen, that would be very appreciated. If you would like to receive a certificate of participation, you can input your details in the feedback form so we can generate that for you and send it back. That's it. Thank you very much again for joining us, and we hope you found this session interesting, insightful, and thought-provoking. We will see all of you in next year's ARC10 activities. Please have a great rest of your day.